Hi there from Chicago. This is Big Ten Today, presented by Gatorade. Mike Call and Anthony Herron. Our buddy Ross Dellinger going to be back with us next week. Do we have a slate of games this weekend or what? I think
we have the slate of games.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when the schedule came out, I marked down, okay, let's see. You'll have Penn State, Ohio State, which turns out to be number 4 versus number 3.
True.
You have the number 1 team in the country taking on the defending national champions.
Yes.
Add in Wisconsin, Iowa, USC, Washington. That's not even all the games.
Yeah, man. We got some
slate.
good ones between rivalry, between the stakes on the line, the gravity of these games in the Big Ten Conference this weekend. Yes, very excited about it.
Let's break down the action right now by starting off with our big story, and it is that top game of Penn State and Ohio State. Here you look at the season stats right now. This will be the 8th straight meeting between these two when they both are ranked. The only Buckeye loss, remember, was by 1 point on the road to the current number 1 team in the country when they were driving in the last minute of the game. OSU has dominated this rivalry recent history, winning 7 straight matchups and 9 of the last 10, all against James Franklin. Plenty of angles to break down in this game, but let's start with the most important position, the quarterback play. Drew Aller has been the guy at Penn State, but he got injured in last week's game. How big a deal is it if Bo Pribula is taking most of the snaps this weekend?
Well, the good thing is James Franklin takes an approach where his number 2 quarterback constantly gets work, constantly is prepared for moments just like this. In Drew Aller's freshman season, he was that guy. You think all the way back to Will Levis when he was a backup in State College a few years ago. He was still working into the game, still a part of the Penn State offense. And we've seen for multiple seasons now with Drew Aller as the starter, Bo Pribula getting major work in the Nittany Lions offense. So as far as just understanding the Andy Kotelnicki system and recognizing what he needs to do, how he's capable of feeding the football around with the variety that Kotelnicki will throw at the Ohio State defense, Bo Pribula is as ready as any backup quarterback could be for this moment. And also just the way he carries himself, his demeanor. He has really ingratiated himself with his team, with his coaches, because of the way that he constantly prepares like the starter. That's why he looks so good in action that he just had over the weekend in Madison, and why I do believe that Penn State has all the confidence in the world that he'll be able to command the stage again, getting the start. Now, stylistically, what he does from a talent perspective, yes, he's a different quarterback than Drew Aller, more mobility that he brings to Penn State's offense. But as far as just how that can impact the way that they can attack Ohio State's defense, you can make the case that there are some positives to the enhanced mobility that Bo Pribula will provide, because there's all kinds of eye candy in Penn State's offense. So will the Nittany Lions take the field just as confident as they would have if Drew Aller is capable of starting? Yes, I think they're going to be confident in either guy. And it's also a bit of a banged up, Buckeyes outfit that comes in and prepares for this game as well. But Bo Pribula will be ready to take this stage.
And I remember in August, there was never a moment where James Franklin went out of his way to say Drew Aller is our number 1 guy, no doubt. Like, he kept talking all summer long about how much he liked Bo Pribula and how much the two of them were giving it a good run. What about big picture Penn State? I know the answer to this question is going to say, well, we'll find out Saturday. But how good are the Nittany Lions, right? You look at their wins this year. The West Virginia game felt really good, but now the Mountaineers are 4-4. They got a win against Illinois, a 6-2 team. Beat Wisconsin this past week fairly soundly. That's a 5-3 team. Nobody has a crazy good resume when you're only 7 or 8 games in, but from what you've seen so far, how good are they?
I've been abundantly impressed with Penn State this season. Some of the questions that we had coming into this year were about whether or not the offense could take that additional step in its combustibility and the explosion. We've seen that both with the passing attack and with the run game for the Nittany Lions. Now, not on a consistent basis, but to me, that's a good thing, because they've had to showcase versatility with their offense. It's not only about the big play with Drew Aller's big arm. It's not only about the open field ability of the running back position with Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen. It can be about both. And we have seen them both blow teams away, even in contests where they've had slow starts. We have also seen them have to have games in the fourth quarter where they've had to rise up and make big plays. So they've been able to get to this undefeated point in the season, winning in about every which way you could hope to win. I would say really the main concern of any I would have for Penn State is the slow starts, because you'd like to come out of the gates more quickly. And on both sides of the football, we've seen them have to sort of sift through things, figure things out, and then play their best football in the second half. But if there's either half, You're going to play at your best. You want it to be in half number 2. You want that finishing kick to be what's showcased. And that's really a big credit to James Franklin with new coordinators in all phases: offense, defense, special teams, a few players in and out of the lineup, both on defense and now possibly at quarterback. We've seen him continue to have Penn State playing their best football in the second halves of games. That's a really big deal when you're a team that's got championship aspirations.
Yeah, and in this rivalry specifically, slow starts have definitely hurt Penn State since James Franklin has been the head coach. I'm curious if you still feel – I feel like there's a little bit of a narrative that Penn State almost has to win this game for their playoff hopes. I don't buy that. I mean, I feel like if they're a one-loss team in the Big Ten and their only loss is to Ohio State, I don't mean to undermine the value of this game. I think this is a huge game. But especially if they look pretty good in this one, I don't think in a 12-team playoff world – they're eliminated. Do you?
I would agree. I would very much agree with that because their resume, certainly this game will enhance their resume. Frankly, win or lose, as long as they go out there and play well, this could be a resume enhancer. But in the expanded playoff era, with them already being in the top 5 in the country, this is a game that folks will come out of this, I think, feeling very impressed with what Penn State brings to the table. So win or lose, it can be a game that just bolsters the way folks perceive the Nittany Lions because Ohio State is one of the top teams in the country. And between the two of them, the perception will be coming in that Ohio State is the squad with more desperation because even though it was the number 1 team in the country, the Buckeyes do have a loss on their resume. Penn State does not. And each team comes in a bit wounded, but Penn State, if they're able to make this happen without their starting quarterback, if Drew Aller can't go in the game, if you don't have your QB, if you potentially don't have your best defensive player as well, if Denai Dennis Sutton can't go, then there's going to be a lot on the line for both these squads, but each can make the case that we're not at our peak. Physically, we're both a little bit banged up. And if Penn State can win this, man, you can make the case, you can make the argument that this is a squad that has the argument for number 2 in the country, perhaps behind the Oregon Ducks.
Yeah. Well, and I think also the flip side of this, there's sort of talk if Ohio State loses this, they're on the outside looking in. But again, they already have literally the best loss you could possibly have among any of these teams that will be fighting for an at-large berth, a 1-point loss on the road to the number 1 team in the country. They'd be on the road against another top 4 team if they lost this. Now, of course, 2 losses is going to be harder. But in this world of 12 teams, if they were to run the table from there on out, it'd be hard to think they wouldn't be right in the thick of a playoff discussion.
And it's supposed to be about not only the win-loss record, your full body of work, and the eye test, and some of those different factors will end up favoring Ohio State versus some of the other teams that are being discussed here. Of course, the Southeastern Conference is the other conference that's going to have a wide variety of teams who will be in consideration come playoff time. But if Ohio State is a 2-loss squad by the end of the regular season, if they don't end up making the Big Ten championship with that in mind, they will still have an immense resume in getting to that point. And they still have exceptional teams remaining on their schedule. I mean, think about if they happen to lose this weekend, but then if they were to go on to beat Indiana. A 2-loss Ohio State team that has a win over an Indiana Hoosier squad that could be in the top 10 in the country by the time that game were to take place, there will still be impressive wins that the Buckeyes have. And then in the end of it, the eye test will certainly favor Ohio State. I mean, even if they're not just dominating, wiping the floor with other teams, there are teams that remain on the Buckeye schedule that you will leave that game saying that they beat a quality opponent, and then you look at their roster top to bottom, the way that Will Howard is executing at quarterback, the way that right now they're a little bit banged up on the offensive line, but the versatility that they showcase where they can attack you with the deep ball, they still can. They've struggled a bit. The run game has certainly taken a step back over the last 2 games here, but if they can get that, crank back up, and then certainly that Buckeyes defense, if that defensive front starts to play to the caliber that we expect those guys in Columbus to play at, and they were able to control Tyree Walker, Penn State was able to control Tyree Walker with their run game over the weekend, and Ohio State has shown that they are also one of the top run defenses in America. So I think this is a squad that top to bottom shows they've got playmakers at every phase that can get this thing done. There are things worthy of concern, though, with the offensive line. Having no Josh Simmons, having him out for the season at left tackle, that's a very big deal.
Well, that's exactly where I was going next. The offensive line feels like the area that Buckeye fans are most concerned about. Simmons is gone. Guy replaced him got injured this past week as well. How much of a concern is specifically the O-line right now?
I think that's where you benefit from having both Ryan Day and Chip Kelly in the meeting room because, the rest of the offensive line, there's some continuity that's been there. And, like Donovan Jackson was injured early in the season, came back into the lineup. He's starting to play well. That matchup on the interior between Donovan Jackson and Zane Bryant on the interior of Penn State's defense, that's one that's really worth looking forward to, because where they can win on the interior with that run game, you have Chip Kelly able to scheme things up. And when you have that, he's a guy that is willing now, more formidable from a physicality perspective with the way they run the football downhill, but then can also scheme things up into the open space, can attack you vertically and horizontally with the run. That sets up the potential for the explosive pass. And it really feels like over the last couple of weeks that Ohio State has wanted to lean more on the run game, even though Will Howard has been throwing the football with efficiency. If they feel that they can utilize that run game to set him up for some quality pass protection and utilize play action opportunities, then there's no reason to think Ohio State won't continue to be a really explosive threat on offense. And we know the talent they have both at wide receiver and at running back. So between Ryan Day and Chip Kelly, they will be able to scheme this offense up into advantageous situations.
I do say I get why a Buckeye fan is sweating things right now. The 2 games ago they lose. The last game they played was this weekend against Nebraska. If you have as much talent as they have, they don't expect to win by 4 points against Nebraska. Big picture overall, where's Ohio State right now?
They're a team that needs to continue getting better. I think by comparison to a team like Oregon that maybe started a bit slow earlier in the season, we've seen the Ducks begin to hit another gear. You can certainly make the same case, I think, about Indiana. As the Hoosiers' competition throughout this season has continued to ramp up, we've seen the Hoosiers begin to play better and better football. Ohio State needs to find that additional gear. They started off playing well. As the opposition has continued to enhance, we haven't necessarily seen Ohio State hit that next gear as of yet. And I think it's there. I'm confident that it's plausible for the Buckeyes to go in that direction, but they've got to find it. Interesting comments from Will Howard this week, after their game the other day where they came out with the victory, talked about how Penn State didn't recruit him and how that's a little bit of an additional driver for him going into the game this week. Whatever it ends up being, where Ohio State finds that additional intangible edge for this game, where they feel a bit discounted, which they're starting to hear that, not only locally, but nationally, folks showing concern about the Buckeyes. If that becomes fuel for Ohio State, then that could be a dangerous thing for a team who does feel like they've been backed into a corner. When you've got that type of talent that Ohio State brings to the table, then yes, I do see that being the type of thing that can allow the Buckeyes to find that other gear.
There have been some awesome games between these two programs.
Yeah.
I mean, just since James Franklin's been here, there's been a 2 overtime game. There were back-to-back years, a 1-point game with massive fourth quarter comebacks. They're both ranked in the top 5. I mean, this is the highest rank for both teams since Franklin's gotten there, by the way, number 3 and number 4.
And stylistically, they're both teams that I think bring versatility with the way that they like to play physical football, but also have athletes they can put in space. So that, to me, is why, out of any of the top teams in the country that Penn State has really played well against at times, I think why it's been Ohio State, where they've just been narrow margins, they consistently come up short. It's because stylistically, they like to attack things in very similar ways.
Again, such a fun game. It's great every year. This year is going to live up to the hype once more. That's going to be over on Fox, but there are plenty of games to get to. Can Indiana make it 9-0 for the first time ever? Anthony's going to explain exactly what kind of challenge the Spartans will provide the Hoosiers